For most of the 20th century, if you wanted to make a movie, you did it in California. That is, until about the last decade or so.
Small fraction of Texas budget surplus could turn this state into the new Hollywood.
Michigan can once again become the Hollywood of the Midwest.
The Big Easy is now known as Hollywood South.
Through huge tax incentives, states across the country have been trying to lure film and television production away from California for years now. And it's working. LA had its worst year for on-location filming in 2024, the lowest in 3 decades.
I think we put our feet up. We took things for granted.
And over the last few years, a new state has emerged as a production powerhouse, my home state.
We're from Jersey, baby.
New Jersey wants as much of the roughly $70 billion show business spends each year to happen right here in the Garden State. The problem is, 37 other states also want a piece of that pie. Since the early 2000s, there's quietly been a film and TV tax incentive arms race between states. And now, some economists are starting to warn that this national bidding war is slowly becoming a race to the bottom. But this state-for-state battle might actually be masking a bigger problem. Big enough that it has the attention of the president. His plan could reshape the industry, but it has showbiz panicked and confused. There is something he can do that could solve the problem, and honestly, I'm shocked it's not getting more attention. So let's figure out what the hell is going on here. Why is New Jersey on such a hot streak? And who is the villain lurking in the shadows?
I'm getting goosebumps just standing up here.
Now, California is still the top state for production in the US, but its share of the pie is down to an all-time low. In the first quarter of this year, the state saw declines in every category of production compared to Q1 last year. So what went wrong in California? Why are studios and filmmakers going elsewhere? Well, a big part of that answer is that the business model for film and TV has drastically changed in recent years. Here's a quick rundown. COVID made everything more expensive, including film and TV production. It also turbocharged the shift to streaming as the main way people watch movies and TV. But here's the problem. Streaming revenues for an individual show or movie don't scale like the old theatrical model did. How does a $200 million movie make money on Prime Video, Paramount Plus, or Netflix? It doesn't, and that's kind of the whole point here. Think of it like a loss leader in retail, like Costco's rotisserie chicken. They lose money on them, but it gets people in the door to buy other stuff. Streaming companies aren't expecting a direct return. A big investment in content is meant to grab attention, keep subscribers engaged, or attract new ones. Then, around 2022, streaming platforms started prioritizing profitability over subscriber growth. This is when you started seeing less free trials and crackdowns on password sharing, ad-supported subscription tiers, all of that fun stuff. But every streaming service still needs a constant flow of content, right? Jeff Rousio, a content creator and writer, broke this down perfectly. The industry went from 3-month theatrical windows and selling DVDs at $20 a pop to offering the entire Disney catalog for less than the price of a movie ticket. If most of your content is basically a loss leader, and your focus is maximizing profitability while minimizing risk, it makes sense to make that content as cheap as possible. So outside of a few big tentpole shows or movies, budgets are being slashed across the board. And that's where California comes back in the mix. California is one of the most expensive places in the world to produce movies or TV. Crew rates, union fees, location fees, police for public safety, fire safety, and permitting are more expensive in California than most other places. Overall, the industry by and large started to realize that with the new streaming era math, one of the easiest and fastest ways to reduce costs was to film anywhere but California, places with lower costs and lucrative tax credits. A lot of industry experts also say that officials in California were overconfident and rested on its laurels. The state did finally make upgrades to its film and TV tax credits to try and lure production back, but by sitting on the sideline for years, it created a huge opportunity for other states, like Jersey.
We're here to say today that New Jersey is ready for its close-up.
In 2018, Governor Murphy brought back the state's film and TV tax credit.
I think philosophically, when you look at tax incentives, it's the role of the state to pick wisely and basically put chum in the water. You're catalyzing economic activity that frankly might not otherwise happen.
Among the 38 states that offer tax credits for film and TV, New Jersey currently has one of the most generous.
We firmly believe in R&D, which in some cases means rip off and duplicate, the best parts of other people's programs.
In New Jersey, production can receive anywhere from 30 to 44% on qualified spend in the form of a transferable tax credit. The state has the fourth highest annual cap in the country, offering $400 million each year in tax credits for productions that qualify. On top of that, it allocates an additional $150 million for studio partners, which are production facilities that are over 250,000 square feet and are committed to operating for at least 10 years.
That studio partner designation is a big deal, not just to make something in Jersey, but to build sound stages and infrastructure. So that's a multi-decade investment on behalf of some of the big studios.
It's why Netflix bought an old Army base and is putting almost $1 billion into a studio campus that will have 12 sound stages covering roughly 500,000 square feet. And about an hour away, Lionsgate is putting studios that will span 350,000 square feet in Newark. 1888 Studios, which isn't technically a studio partner, is building a huge production campus in Bayonne, with 23 massive sound stages on 58 acres of land. Even without these studios open yet, New Jersey is one of the only states that's up in business compared to last year. Just look at the production spend year over year. In 2017, before the tax incentive was brought back, $67 million. Last year, the state cleared $800 million. And in Q2 of this year, production spend more than doubled compared to the year prior. So clearly the tax credit program in New Jersey is working in terms of luring in production spend.
One of the reasons it sells well is that it's paired with good fundamentals.
The fundamentals Tim is referring to is a full production ecosystem. Plus, there is a huge variety of locations in New Jersey, and you can cheat almost any location here.
You can go down to Camden County and you can find Washington, D.C. lookalike. You can go Patterson, Hoboken, Jersey City, Newark, and you'll find New York City lookalike. We've been a lookalike for the American South. We've been a lookalike for Southeast Asia. And I used to joke, the only thing that we don't have is a desert. And in fact, out in Lacey, there's 30 acres of sand.
California definitely has a wide variety of locations too, but it's the third largest state. New Jersey is the fourth smallest state, meaning that huge variety of locations are all within a close geographical proximity. Again, it all comes down to cost. Productions will usually find ways around other challenges. Money talks. In the first quarter of 2025, New Jersey was the 6th largest production hub in the US. And now,
I can already see that we're rolling into the number 4 slot on a fairly regular basis. And I think when Netflix and Lionsgate and Newark open and those walls are up, we'll be a top 3 domestic destination for production, without a doubt.
California and New York consistently dominate the top 2 spots for production spending each year. The real battle is for the 3 to 8 slots on that list. It's the shift in those spots that really highlight the tax incentive arms race that shaped the industry over the last few decades. In the last 20 years, states have shelled out over $25 billion in the form of film and TV tax incentives. But focusing on the state versus state battle is missing the bigger picture. In this era of tighter budgets and studio execs saying that tax incentives are the #1 cost-cutting measure, the battle to lure production teams in isn't just within America's borders. In fact, this whole thing started back in 1998 when Canada fired the first proverbial shot in this tax incentive arms race. By 2002, British Columbia had become the 3rd largest production hub in North America, behind New York and California. Chicago, the musical, was shot in Toronto, which isn't British Columbia, but you get the point. Once other states and countries started to notice what Canada was able to do in just 4 years, film and TV tax incentives became very popular. In 2002, only 5 states offered production incentives. By 2009, that number had jumped to 44. Look, I could talk to you for hours about the history of these tax incentives, which states have introduced plans, increased annual caps, adjusted the credit rates, modified the qualifiers, added bonus credits or uplifts, see Georgia's logo bonus, suspended programs, and even put people in jail. It's an endless story. What you really need to know is
tax credits, for better or for worse, are table stakes for having a film and TV industry.
And productions will follow the money. But more and more, that money isn't in the US. It's overseas. International production has been booming in recent years. Back in Q1 2022, the US accounted for 51% of global production. In Q1 this year, that number is down to 39%. Obviously, productions have been going overseas for years, but back in the day, studios mostly went abroad for creative reasons, like exotic locations for a movie like Ben-Hur or Lawrence of Arabia. Today, it's different. Studios are chasing these tax incentives. A big budget project might film in one country, do visual effects in another, and finish post-production somewhere else, to layer multiple incentives on top of each other. Now, about 58 countries have some form of tax incentive in place for production. Even movies set in LA are being filmed elsewhere. The Substance, which is set entirely in Los Angeles, was filmed in Paris. Novocaine, a movie set entirely in San Diego, was shot in South Africa. And in Georgia, there's been a nearly 50% drop in production spend over the last 3 years after Marvel picked up and moved production to the UK. And it's not just the tax incentives that make international production so appealing. There are other aspects that can really lower costs for studios. There's cheaper labor, minimal union fees, and favorable exchange rates that can all sweeten the deal. Just look at the preferred production hubs so far this year. There are no US locations in the top 5. And these are the studio execs saying this. These are the people that are making the decisions. Now, for transparency here, production levels are down globally compared to a few years ago, but the US has been hit harder than overseas. This is where the WGA, DGA, and SAG-AFTRA strikes come back into play. Yes, the union members all got higher pay, better residuals, and job protections, which is obviously great, but that means higher crew costs for the studios or production companies who were already seeing their budgets cut. And look, I don't want it to sound like I'm blaming the union members for striking, and it is definitely not the only reason productions have gone international, but unfortunately there are times when good intention changes to policy from unions or government can actually make the problem you're trying to fix worse. The reality is most of these studios and streaming services are part of public companies. The heads of these places have a responsibility to be cost efficient and boost profits as much as possible. The strikes gave every CEO and studio head 8 months to go through their P&L and find ways to cut costs. If it's significantly cheaper to shoot in Budapest than it is to shoot in California, New York, Georgia, or Jersey, they're gonna do it. Production dollars just stretch further internationally. So why should you care? Well, this is a national issue. Film and TV are our largest cultural export and a huge part of America's soft power. They spread the idea of the American dream around the world. I would bet that most Americans wouldn't be thrilled with that work going abroad. And it's a massive problem for the Americans that work in the industry. The crew, the below-the-line workers. These aren't Hollywood elites. They're regular people working regular jobs. When productions move abroad, it's their jobs that disappear. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, California has lost 40,000 production jobs in the last 2 years. And overall entertainment employment in the US is 25% lower than its peak in 2022. Which brings us back to Trump.
Our film industry has been decimated by other countries.
He's said he'll impose a 100% tariff on any and all movies made outside of the US multiple times now. Now, enforcing a tariff on a movie is dicey. No one really seems to know how that would work, but apparently an interesting idea was brought to the table in the same discussion. A federal film tax credit, 10% that can be layered on top of any state incentive. And this isn't a new idea. Reagan lobbied President Truman when he was the head of SAG, and backed a federal tax break when he was the governor of California. Didn't go anywhere at the time. Now it seems to be gaining traction, but there are obviously legislative hurdles to get over. And it needs to be enough to offset the savings studios are seeing on international production, otherwise it won't really make a difference. So where do we go from here? For now, state-level incentives are still one of the best ways to keep production in the US. When they're done right, they can create jobs and boost local businesses, and even raise real estate values around big studios. But there are certainly critics. Some economists warn that the state-for-state battle is becoming a race to the bottom. Others say that these incentives cost more in tax revenue than they generate in economic benefits. Some people feel that this is flat-out corporate welfare, that we're giving hundreds of millions of dollars to Hollywood elites. And there are audits that say the return on investment in many states is just pennies on the dollar. Whereas advocates say that judging the incentives based on dollars in versus dollars out misses the big picture, that there are larger positive economic ripple effects that aren't accounted for. And really, economic development programs aren't meant to raise revenue for a state government. They're more of a long-term investment meant to create jobs, attract businesses, build infrastructure, and spur other economic activity.
You have to put these programs in place with a level of responsibility. You have to have an eye toward the broader impact on your economy, on your society. Will it create economic activity? Will it generate jobs? Will it generate investments that you otherwise may not have pursued? It has to check all those boxes.
At the end of the day, this is a multifaceted problem with no one-size-fits-all solution. It's complicated. A federal film tax credit could bring more production back to the US, but it won't fix Hollywood's broken business model. And the fact that global production is down, who knows what the solution is there. If studios and streaming services keep struggling, don't be surprised if you see more movie theaters close and subscription prices climb. For now, at least, I'll be happy that these massive studios are being built and more production is happening in my home state. What's your favorite show that's ever shot in Jersey? There's a right answer.
It's got to be Sopranos.
That's the right answer.
Right? I mean, there's kind of no two ways about it. I mean,
You nailed it.
Hello.